Hey guys, tonight we begin with the surprisingly complex and not so boring world of a single fox navigating the quiet drama of territorial survival. Those patient hunters who spend entire seasons perfecting the art of staying alive through careful planning, strategic thinking, and the occasional spectacular mistake. While nature documentaries make it look effortless, the truth is, being a fox requires more wisdom than you'd expect. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes open after what feels like several geological epochs but is probably just 2 weeks. The world turns out to be disappointingly three-dimensional and much brighter than advertised. Everything is enormous and either wants to eat you or is completely indifferent to your existence, which is somehow worse. Your first glimpse of your mother reveals she's been expecting you to figure out basic survival skills through osmosis. She has the patient expression of someone who's already given up but is too polite to mention it. Your siblings appear to be adapting to consciousness with varying degrees of success. One of them keeps walking into walls with the determination of a tiny, furry battering ram. The den suddenly feels cramped, like sharing a closet with several other people who refuse to acknowledge personal space. Your mother begins the process of teaching you about the outside world, which mostly involves staring at you with mild disappointment, while you fail to understand basic concepts like "don't walk off cliffs" and "rabbits don't want to be friends." You approach walking with the confidence of someone who's never seen it done properly. Your legs have apparently been designed by committee, each one seems to have received different instructions. You lurch forward with the grace of a marionette operated by someone having a seizure, which your siblings find hilarious until they try it themselves. The ground outside the den is covered in what your mother calls grass, but feels more like nature's carpet, if carpets were designed to hide every possible tripping hazard. You step confidently onto what looks like solid ground and immediately sink into a patch of moss that has the structural integrity of pudding. Your mother watches this performance with the resignation of someone who's seen it all before. "Lift your feet," she suggests helpfully, which seems like unnecessarily complicated advice. You try lifting your feet, but this requires coordination between multiple body parts that apparently haven't been introduced to each other yet. The battering ram sibling, who you've mentally nicknamed Crash, demonstrates his own approach to locomotion by running headfirst into a tree root. He bounces off with the enthusiasm of someone who's discovered a new game, then immediately tries it again. His technique lacks refinement, but you have to admire his commitment to the scientific method. Your first successful step is followed immediately by your first successful fall, which teaches you that gravity is not optional and the ground is significantly harder than it appears. The earth has a way of rising up to meet you that suggests it's been waiting for this moment all along. Walking is harder than it looks. You observe to no one in particular, which earns you a snort of amusement from your mother. This is the first time you've managed to say something she agrees with, which feels like progress. Your mother decides it's time to introduce you to the family business, turning other animals into lunch. She demonstrates the proper stalking technique on a beetle, which seems like overkill, but you appreciate the attention to detail. The beetle, meanwhile, continues about its day, with the obliviousness of someone who hasn't checked their life insurance policy recently. Her movements are fluid and purposeful, each step calculated to minimize noise while maximizing approach angle. She becomes a shadow sliding across the ground, invisible until the moment she chooses to be seen. It's the difference between professional performance and whatever it is you've been doing up until now. You attempt to copy her movements, crouching low and moving with what you imagine is predatory grace. In reality, you look like someone trying to sneak through a house while carrying a load of laundry. The beetle notices your approach from roughly 50 feet away and decides to relocate to somewhere with less obvious danger. Subtlety, your mother explains, which is apparently fox terminology for "try not to sound like a one-kit marching band." She demonstrates again, this time on a leaf that's been sitting motionless for what appears to be several hours. Even stationary prey requires proper technique, according to her educational philosophy. Your second attempt involves more crouching and what you hope is stealthy movement. You manage to approach within 10 feet of your target, a particularly slow beetle, who may have fallen asleep standing up before stepping on a twig that explodes with the sound of a small firecracker. The beetle startles awake and scurries away with the urgency of someone who's just remembered they're late for an important appointment. You watch it disappear into the undergrowth, wondering if hunting always involves this much failure or if you're setting some kind of record. Practice, your mother says, which is her way of suggesting that your current skill level falls somewhere between hopeless and try again tomorrow. She's not wrong, but you appreciate her diplomatic phrasing. Your siblings are developing distinct personalities, mostly centered around who can claim the warmest spot in the den and who gets to eat first. One brother has appointed himself pack leader based on being able to bite harder than anyone else, which seems like flawed logic but passes for political theory when you're 3 weeks old. There's a sister who's discovered that whining gets results, and she's applied this knowledge with the thoroughness of a PhD thesis. Another brother has embraced the philosophy of aggressive napping. He sleeps through everything, and somehow always ends up in the best positions. The self-appointed leader you've decided to call him boss has developed a sophisticated understanding of dominance hierarchies based entirely on who can make the most noise during feeding time. His political platform consists mainly of pushing everyone else out of the way while announcing his superiority to anyone within earshot. "I'm the biggest," he declares, with the confidence of someone who's never encountered actual big things. This statement is factually questionable, but he delivers it with such conviction that even you start to wonder if size is more subjective than you'd previously assumed. The whining sister soprano, in your mental filing system, has discovered that persistent vocal complaints can reshape reality to her advantage. She can produce sounds that make adults want to solve her problems just to make the noise stop. It's a remarkably effective strategy that you're slightly jealous you didn't think of first. Aggressive napper, meanwhile, has perfected the art of strategic unconsciousness. He sleeps through boss's dominance displays, soprano's vocal performances, and your own stumbling attempts at basic motor skills. Somehow, when everyone wakes up, he's always managed to claim the warmest corner of the den without appearing to have moved at all. Feeding time has evolved into a complex diplomatic exercise that would challenge experienced negotiators. Your mother positions herself in the center of the den while you and your siblings engage in what can only be described as competitive nursing, which is exactly as undignified as it sounds. Boss believes that leadership privileges extend to food access, and he's willing to defend this principle with the dedication of someone protecting vital national interests. Soprano argues her case through sustained vocal protest that suggests she's being systematically starved, despite evidence to the contrary. You've developed your own strategy based on patience and opportunism, waiting for the initial chaos to settle, then slipping in when everyone else is too tired to maintain their competitive intensity. It's not the most heroic approach, but it has the advantage of requiring minimal physical confrontation. Your mother endures these sessions with the stoic patience of someone who's accepted that dignity is no longer part of her daily experience. She occasionally shifts position to ensure equal access, but mostly she just lies there with the expression of someone who's counting down the days until independence becomes mandatory. "This won't last forever," she mentions during one particularly energetic feeding session, though it's unclear whether she's talking to you or herself. The comment has an ominous quality that suggests your current lifestyle is more temporary than you'd realized. Your world expands gradually as your mother begins introducing you to the concept of outside, which turns out to be significantly larger and more complicated than your den-based existence had prepared you for. The first lesson involves learning that the den entrance isn't actually the edge of the universe, despite initial appearances. Beyond the familiar dirt walls of your home lies a landscape that stretches farther than you can see, filled with objects that move without explanation and sounds that come from invisible sources. Trees rise up like enormous green pillars supporting a sky that's apparently made of some kind of blue substance that changes color throughout the day. "This is grass," your mother explains, indicating the green carpet that covers most surfaces outside the den. "You can walk on it, but try not to trip on the interesting bits." The grass turns out to have more personality than you'd expected. Some of it is soft and yielding, while other patches hide roots, rocks, and small holes designed by nature's practical joker. Your first expedition beyond the den entrance lasts approximately 30 seconds before you encounter a butterfly, which represents your introduction to the concept of things that move for no apparent reason. The butterfly flutters past with the casual indifference of someone who has better things to do than acknowledge your existence. You attempt to follow the butterfly, which seems like a reasonable response to encountering mobile wildlife. This decision leads to your first experience with chasing things that can fly, which turns out to be an exercise in applied futility. The butterfly maintains its altitude with the effortless superiority of someone who's never had to worry about ground-based transportation. Your introduction to weather begins with a gentle spring rain that transforms your familiar world into something resembling a small-scale disaster area. Water falls from the sky with the persistence of someone who's been waiting all day for this opportunity, turning the ground into a substance that's part mud, part quicksand, and entirely problematic for small foxes. Your mother views the rain with the philosophical acceptance of someone who's learned not to take weather personally. "It's wet," she observes, which seems like an understatement but covers the essential facts. Try not to drown in puddles. This advice turns out to be more practical than you'd realized. Puddles have a way of being deeper than they appear, and your current height puts you at a significant disadvantage when it comes to water-related navigation. What looks like a shallow depression from your perspective turns out to be a miniature lake that requires actual swimming skills you don't possess. Your first encounter with a significant puddle teaches you that water and fox fur have a complicated relationship. Wet fur loses most of its insulating properties and gains the ability to make you look like something that was recently dragged through a storm drain. The aesthetic effect is dramatic, but not particularly flattering. Boss approaches the puddle challenge with his usual confidence, announcing his intention to demonstrate proper water navigation. He strides into the puddle with the authority of someone who's never doubted his aquatic abilities, right up until the moment he disappears beneath the surface with a surprised yelp. The rescue operation that follows involves your mother wading into the puddle with the resigned efficiency of someone who's been expecting this exact scenario. Boss emerges from his impromptu swim looking significantly less authoritative and considerably more like a wet rat. Progress in basic life skills follows a pattern that could charitably be described as gradual improvement punctuated by spectacular failures. Each day brings new challenges that reveal previously unknown ways to be incompetent, along with occasional moments of success that suggest you might eventually figure out how to exist without constant supervision. Your walking has evolved from controlled falling to something approaching purposeful movement with frequent unplanned stops. You can now travel several feet in a straight line before encountering an obstacle. That requires creative problem solving or emergency maneuvering. Hunting remains largely theoretical, but you've successfully stalked and captured several leaves, a stick that might have been moving due to wind, and a beetle who appeared to be deceased before you arrived. These victories may not impress experienced predators, but they represent significant personal achievements. Social navigation has become more sophisticated as you've learned to read the warning signs that indicate when boss is about to assert dominance, when soprano is building up to a major vocal performance, and when aggressive napper is about to claim whatever space you're currently occupying. Your mother's patience appears to be infinite, though occasionally you catch her staring into the distance with the expression of someone contemplating career alternatives. She continues to provide guidance, food, and rescue services without complaint, though her educational commentary has become increasingly brief and practical. Your first major solo expedition beyond the immediate vicinity of the den occurs when you become distracted by an interesting smell and wander off without informing anyone of your travel plans. The smell turns out to belong to something that's been dead for longer than you care to calculate, but by the time you make this discovery, you've traveled farther from home than ever before. The world beyond your familiar territory is both fascinating and terrifying, filled with new scents, unfamiliar sounds, and landscape features that seem designed to test your navigation skills. Everything looks different from ground level, and landmarks that seemed obvious from the den entrance become mysterious when viewed from new angles. You attempt to retrace your steps, which would be easier if you'd been paying attention to where you were going in the first place. The path back home involves more trial and error than you'd prefer, with each wrong turn leading to new areas that definitely weren't part of your original route. A moderate panic sets in when you realize that lost isn't just a theoretical concept, but a practical description of your current situation. The den could be anywhere within a radius that seems to expand every time you think about it, and your mother has no way of knowing where to begin looking for you. The rescue, when it comes, arrives in the form of your mother's voice, calling from somewhere that sounds both very close and impossibly far away. You respond with the most urgent vocalizations you can produce, which probably sound like distress calls to anyone who doesn't know you're just geographically confused. Your reunion is brief and businesslike. Your mother appears, looks you over for obvious damage, and begins leading you home without extensive commentary on your navigation skills. The lecture comes later, delivered in the patient tone of someone explaining why certain behaviors are discouraged for practical rather than punitive reasons. As the weeks pass, your mother's educational approach becomes increasingly focused on practical skills that will be necessary for eventual independence. The lessons cover everything from advanced hunting techniques to territorial awareness, though most of the advanced concepts remain somewhat theoretical given your current skill level. Someday you'll need to find your own territory, she explains during one of these educational sessions, which introduces the unsettling concept that your current living arrangements are temporary. This requires understanding what makes good territory and what makes bad territory. Good territory, according to your mother's expertise, includes reliable water sources, adequate prey populations, defensible boundaries, and minimal human interference. Bad territory includes everything else, with special emphasis on areas that flood regularly, have been claimed by larger predators, or require more hunting skill than you're likely to develop in the immediate future. The independence timeline remains vague, but your mother's increasing references to when you're older and after you've learned to hunt properly suggest that your graduation from the family den is more a matter of when than if. This prospect is both exciting and terrifying, like being informed that you'll eventually need to perform surgery, but the training schedule hasn't been finalized yet. Your siblings seem to be receiving similar preparation, though each of them is approaching the concept of future independence with characteristic strategies. Boss appears to believe that leadership experience in den politics will automatically translate to territorial success. Soprano has apparently decided that vocal persistence will solve whatever challenges arise. Aggressive Napper continues to sleep through most educational sessions, presumably absorbing knowledge through some kind of unconscious learning process. The season is advancing towards summer, bringing with it longer days, warmer weather, and the kind of abundant prey that makes hunting seem almost possible. Your mother's lessons become more frequent and more detailed, as if she's working against some kind of deadline that hasn't been explicitly announced but seems to be approaching steadily. Your world is about to become significantly larger and more complicated, whether you're ready for it or not. The den that's been your entire universe will soon become just a starting point for adventures that will require all the skills you're still trying to master. The art of being useless, it turns out, is just the first step in a much longer curriculum. At 6 weeks old, you've achieved the motor skills of a drunk toddler and the confidence of someone who's never failed at anything. This combination proves to be as dangerous as it sounds. Your mother has begun leaving you and your siblings alone for longer periods, presumably to maintain her sanity and possibly to give the local prey animals a false sense of security. The den feels different now that you've mastered basic mobility and discovered that the world extends beyond its earthen walls. What once seemed like a comfortable family home now feels more like a launching pad for adventures that your mother would probably prefer you didn't undertake. Unfortunately for her peace of mind, your newly acquired walking skills have made exploration not just possible but irresistible. Your siblings are experiencing similar expansions of their territorial ambitions. Boss has begun conducting what he calls leadership reconnaissance, which mostly involves wandering off and getting lost until someone comes to find him. Soprano has discovered that her vocal talents carry much farther in open air, allowing her to broadcast her opinions across a wider area than anyone really wants. Aggressive Napper continues his policy of strategic unconsciousness, though he's now able to sleep in a variety of outdoor locations that previous generations of foxes would have considered unsuitable for rest. You decide to explore beyond the immediate vicinity of the den, which your mother has somehow forgotten to explicitly forbid. The world beyond your familiar dirt patch turns out to be vast, complicated, and full of things that make noise when you step on them. The morning sun filters through the canopy above, creating patches of light and shadow that transform the forest floor into a constantly shifting landscape. What look like clear pathways from the den entrance reveal themselves to be obstacle courses designed by someone with a twisted sense of humor and an unlimited supply of fallen branches. The forest floor is a minefield of twigs designed by nature's practical joker. Each step produces a symphony of snaps and rustles that announce your presence to everything within a 3-mile radius. You're attempting to move stealthily, but achieving roughly the same noise level as a one-fox marching band. You pause to examine your technique, trying to identify where your stealth approach is going wrong. Your mother's demonstrations had made silent movement look effortless, like floating across the ground without disturbing so much as a leaf. Your own attempts seem to activate every sound-producing element in the immediate environment, as if the forest has been waiting for this opportunity to conduct a percussion concert. A rabbit appears in a clearing ahead, sitting perfectly still in that way rabbits do when they're pretending to be lawn ornaments. You freeze, remembering your mother's lessons about patience and timing. Unfortunately, you also remember that you're supposed to be scary, so you attempt a menacing expression that probably looks more like indigestion. The rabbit continues its statue impression while you try to remember the proper stalking procedure. You're fairly certain it involves getting closer, but the details are fuzzy. The distance between you and potential breakfast seems enormous, filled with countless opportunities for the kind of mistakes that turn hunting expeditions into comedy shows. You take a careful step forward, and your foot finds the one stick in the entire forest that's apparently been booby-trapped with extra loudness. The crack echoes through the trees with the authority of a gunshot, causing several birds to express their opinions about noise pollution and at least one squirrel to voice what sounds like a detailed critique of your hunting methods. The rabbit explodes into motion with the enthusiasm of someone who's just remembered they left the stove on. You give chase with all the coordination of a shopping cart with a broken wheel. The rabbit easily outdistances you, but you continue running anyway, because stopping would require admitting defeat, and you're not ready for that level of self-awareness. Your pursuit takes you through terrain that becomes increasingly challenging as you go. Low branches grab at your fur with the persistence of salespeople. Thorny bushes seem determined to collect samples of your coat, and the ground develops an alarming tendency to slope at unexpected angles. The rabbit, meanwhile, navigates these obstacles with the effortless grace of someone who's been expecting this exact scenario their entire life. It bounds over logs that require you to scramble around, slips through gaps that force you to find alternative routes, and maintains a pace that makes your maximum speed look like an enthusiastic walk. Your pursuit of breakfast leads you to the creek, which turns out to be wider and wetter than it appeared from a distance. You approach the water with the confidence of someone who's never had to consider the relationship between foxes and aquatic environments. The creek burbles along with the cheerful indifference of a natural feature that's been moving water from one place to another for longer than anyone can remember. The sound is pleasant and soothing, which should probably serve as a warning that you're about to encounter something that's more complicated than it appears. The first step into the creek is surprisingly successful. Your foot finds solid bottom and you remain upright. Emboldened, you continue forward, right up until the creek bed decides to stop existing, and you find yourself swimming whether you want to or not. Swimming, it turns out, is one of those skills that seems like it should be instinctual but absolutely isn't. You thrash around with great enthusiasm but questionable technique, managing to stay afloat through sheer panic and possibly divine intervention. The water is cold enough to make you question all your life choices, which admittedly isn't a very long list yet. The current has its own opinions about where you should be going, and these opinions don't align with your preference for returning to dry land immediately. You find yourself engaged in a negotiation with physics that you're clearly losing, while water fills your ears and nose with the persistence of someone collecting overdue debts. Your paddling technique resembles the swimming style of someone who's learned everything they know about aquatic locomotion from watching other people drown. Each stroke produces maximum splash with minimal forward progress, creating a disturbance that probably looks impressive from a distance, but accomplishes very little in terms of actual transportation. You eventually manage to paddle to the opposite bank, where you drag yourself onto dry land with all the dignity of a half-drowned mop. Your fur is plastered to your body in a way that makes you look like a very sad, very wet cat. The rabbit you were chasing has long since disappeared, probably to tell all its friends about the incompetent fox who thought water was optional. The recovery process involves a significant amount of shaking, which distributes creek water across a wider area, while failing to restore your fur to anything resembling its normal appearance. You discover that wet fox fur has properties that no one bothered to mention during your basic education, including the ability to make you look substantially smaller and considerably more pathetic than your actual size would suggest. Still damp and significantly humbled, you encounter your first adult fox who isn't your mother. He's a grizzled old male with scars that suggest he's had more successful encounters with life than you have. He looks you up and down with the expression of someone evaluating a particularly disappointing garage sale find. "You're one of the new litter," he observes, which isn't really a question. His voice has the gravelly quality of someone who's spent years explaining obvious things to young foxes who don't listen. You try to appear impressive, which is difficult when you're dripping creek water and covered in mud. "I was hunting," you explain, as if this clarifies anything. He nods slowly, the way adults do when they're trying not to laugh. "How'd that work out for you?" You glance back at the creek, where your dignity is presumably still floating downstream. "I'm working on my technique." "I can see that," he replies, and you're not entirely sure whether he's being encouraging or sarcastic. "What technique were you working on exactly? Advanced water entry? Experimental swimming methods?" The conversation that follows serves as your introduction to adult fox society, which turns out to have its own complex social protocols and unwritten rules about everything from territorial boundaries to appropriate hunting methods. Your new acquaintance, who introduces himself as Greyback, presumably due to the distinctive coloring that comes with age and experience, provides a crash course in local geography and politics. "That creek," he explains, gesturing toward the scene of your recent aquatic adventure, "is the boundary between your mother's territory and mine. Most young foxes learn to respect water boundaries before they learn to swim, but I suppose every generation has its own approach to education. You learn that your impromptu swim has technically made you a trespasser in Greyback's territory, though he seems more amused than offended by this violation. "First time across the creek?" he asks, which seems like a reasonable guess given your current appearance. "First time in the creek," you admit, which earns you what might actually be a sympathetic look. "Swimming is optional," Greyback informs you helpfully. "Most prey animals can't swim either, so falling into water during a hunt usually means everyone goes hungry. Might want to remember that for next time." Your soggy adventure leads you to the edge of human territory, where you discover one of civilization's greatest mysteries: garbage cans. These cylindrical monuments to human wastefulness stand like sentries guarding treasures beyond imagination. The transition from wild forest to human-influenced landscape is gradual but unmistakable. The trees thin out and become more organized, the underbrush gives way to something resembling lawn, and the general chaos of natural growth is replaced by the artificial order that humans seem to prefer. The smell emanating from the nearest can suggest it contains either the most delicious food ever created or something that died under mysterious circumstances, possibly both. You approach with the caution of someone who's already had one educational experience today and isn't eager for another. The garbage can stands approximately twice your height and appears to be constructed from some kind of metal that reflects sunlight with the confidence of something that's never worried about predators. Its smooth sides offer no obvious footholds, and the lid sits on top with the smug superiority of an obstacle that knows it's won before the contest even begins. The can is taller than you anticipated and equipped with a lid that seems designed to keep foxes out, which feels personally insulting. You circle it several times, looking for obvious entry points and finding none. The metal surface is smooth and offers no grip for climbing, but you're nothing if not persistent. Your first approach involves attempting to scale the sides through sheer determination and optimism. This strategy proves ineffective, as your claws find no purchase on the slick surface, and gravity demonstrates its usual commitment to bringing everything back down to ground level. The second approach involves trying to knock the lid off through targeted jumping, which produces a series of metallic clanging sounds that probably alert everything within a mile radius to your presence. The lid, however, remains firmly attached and seemingly unimpressed by your athletic efforts. After several failed attempts to scale the sides, you discover that the can tips if you hit it at the right angle. This revelation is accompanied by a tremendous crash as the entire container topples over, spilling its contents across the ground in a cascade of human excess. The sound of the garbage can hitting the ground is magnificent in its completeness, a crash that seems to contain every possible variation of metallic noise, followed by the rustling symphony of dozens of items scattering across pavement. It's the kind of sound that makes you realize that stealth is no longer a viable option for the remainder of this expedition. The noise attracts attention from the nearby house, where a dog begins expressing its opinions about fox-related property damage. The barking starts as a simple alert, but quickly escalates into the kind of sustained vocal performance that suggests the dog considers this a personal affront to neighborhood security. You grab the first edible-looking item, half a sandwich, that someone apparently abandoned, and retreat to a safe distance to examine your prize. The sandwich is wrapped in some kind of paper that retains moisture and interesting smells, suggesting that humans have developed sophisticated food preservation techniques that go far beyond simple caching. The sandwich is a revelation. It contains flavors you didn't know existed and textures that make your mouth water. Human food, it turns out, is everything your mother's hunting lessons never prepared you for. It's salty, complex, and requires no chasing whatsoever. The bread has a texture that's both soft and substantial, nothing like the natural foods you've encountered in the forest. Between the bread layers are substances that taste like concentrated versions of things you recognize: meat that's more intensely meaty than any prey you've experienced, vegetation that's somehow been made more flavorful than anything that grows wild. The discovery of human food creates a philosophical crisis that your 6-week-old brain isn't entirely equipped to handle. On one hand, the sandwich represents an easy meal that required no hunting skills and involved minimal personal risk. On the other hand, your mother's educational program has focused exclusively on the traditional fox approach to nutrition, which involves catching things that are still moving. You consider whether this counts as hunting in any meaningful sense. The sandwich wasn't hiding, it wasn't trying to escape, and it certainly wasn't faster than you are. The challenge was purely technical, accessing the container rather than outsmarting prey. It feels like cheating, but it also feels like eating, which creates a moral dilemma that's too complex for your current level of philosophical development. The dog's continued barking adds urgency to your ethical deliberations. Whatever the moral implications of garbage can raiding might be, you're clearly not in a position to conduct extended analysis while remaining in the vicinity of your crime scene. You retreat to a safe distance with your prize, finding a comfortable spot beneath a large oak tree where you can eat your ill-gotten gains while considering the broader implications of your discovery. The sandwich disappears quickly, leaving you with a satisfied stomach and a significant number of unanswered questions about the role of human food sources in traditional fox ecology. The trip back to familiar territory proves more challenging than your outbound adventure, partly because you're approaching from an unfamiliar direction, and partly because your morning's activities have left you with a somewhat confused sense of geography. The creek, which had seemed like a simple obstacle during your rabbit chase, now looms as a significant navigation challenge that requires careful planning. You approach the water with considerably more respect than you'd shown during your earlier encounter. The current looks exactly as swift as it had proven to be, and the opposite bank seems even farther away when you're planning the crossing rather than simply falling into it. Your second creek crossing is conducted with more strategy and less enthusiasm than the first. You select a narrower section where the water appears shallower, test the bottom carefully before committing to each step, and maintain a healthy respect for the current's ability to redesign your travel plans. The crossing is successful, though not particularly graceful. You emerge on the familiar side of the creek with most of your dignity intact and significantly more knowledge about water navigation than you'd possessed that morning. The experience qualifies as educational, though you're not eager to repeat the curriculum anytime soon. Your return to the den is greeted by your mother's patient examination, which seems designed to catalogue every adventure you've had during your unauthorized expedition. She approaches this investigation with the thoroughness of someone who's developed expertise in reconstructing young fox adventures from physical evidence. "You've been swimming," she observes, which isn't really a question. Your still, damp fur apparently provides sufficient documentation of your aquatic activities. "I fell in the creek," you explain, which is technically accurate while avoiding some of the more embarrassing details of how the falling occurred. "And rolling in garbage," she continues, sniffing at your fur with the focused attention of a detective examining evidence. The sandwich has left its own aromatic signature that apparently tells its own story about your morning's discoveries. You consider whether to volunteer information about the garbage can incident or wait to see how much your mother can deduce from available evidence. Her investigative skills seem quite advanced, so the truth will probably emerge regardless of your cooperation. "Human food is different from fox food," she explains, which suggests she's conducted her own research into alternative food sources. It's designed for human digestive systems, not fox digestive systems. Too much of it can make you sick. This seems like important information that could have been shared earlier in your education, but you appreciate the guidance even if it comes after the fact. Your mother's approach to teaching appears to involve a combination of proactive instruction and reactive correction, depending on which method seems most appropriate for the specific lesson being learned. Your siblings' response to your adventure stories varies according to their individual personalities and risk tolerance. Boss expresses skepticism about your claims regarding garbage can accessibility, apparently viewing your success as a challenge to his leadership credentials. He announces his intention to conduct his own garbage can expedition, presumably to demonstrate superior technique. Soprano listens to your creek crossing narrative with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for disaster stories. She declares her intention to avoid water entirely, which seems like a reasonable policy, but might limit her future territorial options. Aggressive Napper appears to have slept through your entire adventure, including your return and debriefing session. He wakes up long enough to confirm that you're still alive and accounted for, then returns to his policy of strategic unconsciousness with the dedication of someone who's found a lifestyle that works for him. Your first major solo adventure has provided education in several areas that weren't covered in your mother's formal curriculum. You've learned that water is more complicated than it appears, that human food sources exist but come with their own challenges, and that adult foxes have opinions about proper behavior that aren't necessarily communicated in advance. The experience has also demonstrated that the world beyond your immediate territory is both larger and more complex than your den-based existence had prepared you for. Every new area contains its own geography, its own rules, and its own opportunities for the kind of mistakes that provide memorable learning experiences. Your confidence level has been appropriately calibrated by the morning's events. You're still capable of independent exploration, but you now have a more realistic understanding of your current skill level and the kinds of challenges that require more preparation than enthusiasm. The garbage can discovery represents a significant addition to your knowledge base, though you're not yet sure how to integrate this information into your overall survival strategy. Human food sources clearly exist and can be accessed, but the techniques required are different from traditional hunting methods and come with their own risks and complications. The success of your morning expedition, despite its various challenges and embarrassments, has established a precedent for future exploration. You've proven that you can navigate beyond familiar territory and return safely, though the safety margins were perhaps smaller than optimal. Your mother's reaction suggests that solo adventures are acceptable within certain parameters, though these parameters haven't been explicitly defined. You'll need to develop your own guidelines for risk assessment and expedition planning, based on the lessons learned from your current experience and whatever additional education your mother provides. The creek will clearly require more practice and better technique before you can consider it a routine obstacle rather than a significant challenge. Water navigation skills seem like they might be useful for future territorial expansion and prey access, assuming you can develop competence that goes beyond survival-level thrashing. The garbage can discovery opens up possibilities for alternative food sources that could supplement traditional hunting, though the logistics and ethics of regular scavenging remain to be worked out. You'll need to develop techniques that are more sophisticated than simply knocking over containers and hoping for the best. Your adventure has provided enough material for several days' worth of reflection and planning. The world has proven to be more interesting and more challenging than your limited experience had suggested, which means that future expeditions will require better preparation and more realistic expectations about your current capabilities. The transition from den-based existence to independent exploration has officially begun, whether your mother is entirely ready for it or not. Your education is expanding beyond formal lessons to include the kind of practical experience that can only be gained through direct contact with the wider world and its various opportunities for spectacular mistakes. By 3 months old, you've achieved a level of competence that could generously be described as functional. You can catch mice roughly 60% of the time, avoid most obvious dangers, and have learned to recognize that high-pitched yelping sound as your own voice when surprised. Your mother has begun making pointed comments about independence and the advantages of finding your own den, which is her polite way of saying the lease is up. The transition from occasionally successful to marginally competent has been gradual enough that you hadn't noticed it happening until your mother started treating you like someone who might actually survive on their own. Her educational approach has shifted from protective guidance to practical preparation, with increasing emphasis on skills you'll need when parental backup is no longer available. Your siblings are experiencing similar pressure to achieve independence, though each is responding to the challenge according to their established personalities. Boss has begun making grandiose proclamations about his future territorial empire, apparently planning to claim half the county through sheer force of personality. Soprano has decided that independence is negotiable and has been lobbying for extended family residence through sustained vocal campaigns. Aggressive Napper continues to sleep through most discussions about the future, presumably hoping that unconsciousness will delay the inevitable. The day arrives with the subtlety of a brick through a window. Your mother gives you a look that could be translated as, "You're taking up space I could be using for something more useful," and you realize that your childhood is officially over. Your siblings are receiving similar notices, and the den suddenly feels like a college dorm during finals week, cramped, tense, and everyone pretending they're not nervous. The eviction process is handled with the diplomatic efficiency of someone who's been planning this conversation for weeks. Your mother doesn't use harsh language or dramatic ultimatums. She simply begins discussing your future in terms that assume it will be taking place somewhere else, starting immediately. Territory selection is important, she explains while methodically grooming herself, as if this is casual conversation rather than a life-changing announcement. You'll want to find something that suits your hunting style and provides room for expansion when you become more successful. You pack your belongings, which consist entirely of whatever's currently in your stomach, and set out to find your fortune. The world beyond your childhood territory looks exactly the same as it always has, but somehow more intimidating. Every tree could be hiding a larger fox with territorial issues, and every clearing might already belong to someone with better teeth than yours. The psychological shift from protected family member to independent adult happens somewhere between leaving the den entrance and reaching the first unfamiliar landmark. Suddenly, every decision becomes your responsibility, every mistake becomes your problem, and every success becomes something you achieved entirely through your own efforts. Your first night alone is spent in a half-hearted burrow you dig beneath a fallen log. It's more of a shallow depression than actual shelter, but it keeps the wind off and provides the illusion of security. You lie awake listening to every sound, which in a forest turns out to be approximately all the sounds that have ever existed, playing simultaneously. The soundscape of independence is significantly more complex than the filtered audio environment of family life. Every rustling leaf could indicate approaching danger. Every snapping twig might announce a territorial violation, and every distant howl represents someone else's drama that could potentially become your problem. Sleep, when it finally comes, is interrupted by dreams about territory disputes, failed hunts, and the growing realization that competence is a relative concept that varies dramatically depending on what you're being asked to do. Your second day of independence brings you face to face with the complex politics of Fox real estate. You've found what appears to be an ideal location, a hillside with good drainage, multiple escape routes, and a clear view of the surrounding area. It's perfect, which should have been your first warning. The hillside offers everything your mother's real estate lessons had emphasized. Elevated position for surveillance, natural windbreaks, proximity to water without flood risk, and terrain that favors defenders over attackers. The prey sign is abundant, the human disturbance is minimal, and the whole area has the kind of pristine quality that suggests nobody else has discovered its potential. A voice behind you suggests that you might want to reconsider your plans. You turn to find another young fox, roughly your age but with the kind of confidence that comes from never having fallen into a creek while chasing breakfast. His name is presumably something intimidating, but you never get the chance to ask because he's too busy explaining why this particular piece of real estate isn't available. "This is my territory," he announces, as if ownership were determined by whoever shows up first with the boldest claims. Has been for weeks. You look around at the unmarked landscape, searching for some obvious sign of habitation. "I don't see any scent marks," you point out, which seems like a reasonable observation. He fixes you with the kind of stare usually reserved for people who don't understand that the movie is over when the credits start rolling. "I was just about to get to that," he says, and proceeds to demonstrate the traditional method of territorial marking with more enthusiasm than the situation really requires. The performance that follows is clearly designed to establish dominance through comprehensive scent coverage and dramatic posturing. Your rival, who introduces himself as Redclaw, with the kind of theatrical flair that suggests he's been practicing this introduction, marks every significant landmark within a 50-foot radius while maintaining eye contact that borders on aggressive. The negotiation that follows is your introduction to the diplomatic arts. You learn that territory disputes are less about actual space and more about who's willing to engage in the most creative threats. Your opponent has clearly studied this art form, while you're still working with the basic curriculum of run away when things get scary. Redclaw's negotiating style combines logical arguments with implied violence in a way that suggests he's had professional training in territorial diplomacy. He explains the legal precedents for his claim, outlines the consequences of challenging established boundaries, and provides detailed descriptions of what happens to foxes who fail to respect property rights. This hillside has been in my family for generations, he claims, which seems unlikely given that he's roughly your age and was presumably evicted from his own family den within the last week. My grandfather's grandfather marked these trees with his own scent, establishing a territorial legacy that extends back to the founding of local fox society. You suspect this historical narrative has been embellished for dramatic effect, but you're not in a position to demand documentation. Redclaw's confidence suggests either legitimate territorial rights or exceptional skill at creative fiction, and you're not qualified to determine which interpretation is correct. Eventually, you reach a compromise that allows both of you to maintain face while you go find somewhere else to live. It's your first lesson in the economics of conflict. Sometimes the cost of winning isn't worth whatever you're fighting over. The negotiated settlement involves your voluntary withdrawal from the disputed territory in exchange for Redclaw's agreement not to pursue further territorial claims against you in adjacent areas. It's the kind of diplomatic solution that gives everyone something they can describe as victory, while avoiding the kind of physical confrontation that might require medical attention. Your continued search for suitable territory becomes an education in the harsh realities of fox real estate. Every promising location turns out to have some fatal flaw that wasn't immediately apparent. Established ownership, environmental hazards, or proximity to human activities that make long-term residence impractical. The valley with excellent water access is already claimed by a family of badgers who express their territorial preferences through aggressive excavation and intimidating growling. The forested area with abundant prey is bisected by a hiking trail that sees regular human traffic during daylight hours. The meadow with perfect sun exposure turns into a swamp during any weather more substantial than morning dew. Each rejection teaches you something about the relationship between attractive features and hidden problems. Prime real estate is prime precisely because it's rare, and anything that seems too good to be true usually is. The territories that remain available to young foxes fresh out of the family den are available for reasons that become obvious once you spend time examining them carefully. Your education in property evaluation expands to include factors that weren't covered in your mother's basic curriculum. Seasonal flooding patterns, predator migration routes, human development schedules, and the complex social dynamics that govern interspecies territorial agreements. After several more territorial disappointments, you discover an abandoned badger set that's been vacant long enough to lose most of its previous owner's scent. It's not exactly prime real estate. The entrance is partially collapsed, there's a persistent draft from somewhere, and something has been using one corner as a bathroom, but it's available and defensible. The discovery comes after a week of increasingly desperate searching that had begun to make you wonder whether suitable territory still existed anywhere within reasonable travel distance of your birth den. The badger set sits in a modest depression that offers protection from wind and reasonable concealment from casual observation. The previous occupant appears to have left under circumstances that didn't allow for extensive cleaning or maintenance. The tunnel system shows signs of hasty abandonment, with cached food supplies left to spoil and construction projects abandoned mid-completion. Whatever caused the badger to relocate, it happened quickly enough that basic housekeeping wasn't a priority. You spend 3 days renovating, which mostly involves moving dirt from places where you don't want it to places where you do. The work is surprisingly satisfying, like completing a puzzle where all the pieces are the same color and covered in mud. The excavation reveals that the badger had been a more ambitious engineer than the surface evidence suggested. Hidden passages connect multiple chambers, and the main tunnel system includes features that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of drainage, ventilation, and defensive architecture. Your modifications focus on adapting the existing infrastructure to fox-specific requirements. Foxes need different entrance angles than badgers, prefer different chamber proportions, and have their own ideas about optimal traffic flow patterns. The renovation becomes an exercise in species-specific interior design, conducted entirely with teeth and claws. The finished product won't win any architectural awards, but it's yours. You have multiple entrances. 1 intentional, 2 accidental, adequate drainage, if you don't count the small leak near the back, and enough space to pace nervously when the weather turns bad. The sense of ownership that comes with completing your own den construction is unlike anything you experience during family life. Every tunnel represents your own labor, every chamber reflects your own design decisions, and every improvement demonstrates your growing competence as an independent adult. Without your mother's backup or your siblings' distraction, hunting becomes a completely different art form. You're no longer part of a team. You're a solo act trying to convince an audience of prey animals that you know what you're doing. The transition from family hunting to solo operations requires adjustments to techniques that had been developed with group dynamics in mind. Strategies that relied on coordinated movement or distraction tactics must be replaced with approaches that work for single operators with limited backup options. Your first successful solo hunt is a mouse who apparently fell asleep on the job. You approach with textbook stealth, execute a perfect pounce, and find yourself holding a very surprised rodent who seems as shocked by your success as you are. The mouse looks up at you with the expression of someone who's just realized they've been caught in a very avoidable situation. For a moment, you both just stare at each other, neither quite sure what the protocol is for this scenario. "Well," says the mouse eventually, "this is awkward." You're inclined to agree, but you're also hungry, and survival has a way of simplifying ethical dilemmas. The mouse accepts its fate with the resignation of someone who's been expecting this conversation for weeks. The success provides both nutrition and confidence, demonstrating that your hunting skills have developed sufficiently to support independent existence. The mouse was admittedly not the most challenging prey, but successful predation under any circumstances represents meaningful progress from your fumbling early attempts. Subsequent hunts reveal the difference between occasional success and reliable competence. Solo hunting requires not just skill but consistency, since failure to secure regular meals quickly becomes a more serious problem when family backup isn't available to compensate for off days. Your new territory puts you in proximity to an established vixen who's been living alone for several seasons. She's older, more experienced, and has the kind of casual competence that makes your own bumbling efforts look like performance art. She introduces herself by critiquing your den construction while you're still digging. "You might want to consider drainage," she observes, watching you move the same pile of dirt for the 3rd time. Water flows downhill, in case that wasn't covered in your basic education. Her approach to neighborly relations combines helpfulness with subtle mockery, in a way that suggests extensive experience dealing with young foxes who think they know more than they actually do. She offers advice with the patient condescension of someone who's watched numerous independent living experiments fail due to predictable mistakes. "First territory?" she asks, though your construction technique has probably already answered that question. You can tell by the way you're moving dirt around without actually improving anything. Her territory is a masterpiece of fox engineering, multiple entrances concealed so well you wouldn't notice them if she hadn't pointed them out, cached food supplies, and even what appears to be a dedicated grooming area. It's the difference between a professional operation and whatever it is you're doing. The comparison between her sophisticated territorial infrastructure and your own modest excavation project is both inspiring and demoralizing. Her setup represents years of gradual improvement and accumulated expertise, while yours represents 3 days of enthusiastic digging guided by minimal theoretical knowledge. "How long did this take you?" you ask, gesturing at her elaborate setup. She considers the question with the air of someone calculating compound interest. 3 years of steady improvement, she says, though I had the advantage of not falling into the creek during my first hunting expedition. Word travels fast in fox society, apparently. The conversation that follows provides your introduction to the informal information network that connects established foxes throughout the region. Your new neighbor, who introduces herself as Sage, presumably in reference to her advisory role rather than her coloring, seems to know the recent history of every fox within a day's travel, including details about your own family background that you hadn't realized were public knowledge. The strategic planning process includes scenario analysis that evaluates different possible futures and identifies optimal responses to changing conditions. This level of analytical sophistication would have been overwhelming when you were focused on day-to-day survival, but your accumulated competence has created mental capacity for higher-order thinking about territorial optimization and resource management. Your third year brings with it a challenge worthy of your accumulated skills. A family of rabbits has taken up residence in the ideal habitat at the center of your territory. They're not just any rabbits, these are experienced, clever rabbits who've clearly survived long enough to develop sophisticated anti-fox strategies. The rabbit family represents the kind of hunting challenge that separates amateur predators from professional hunters. Their survival to reproductive age indicates exceptional competence in anti-predator techniques, while their choice of prime territory within your domain suggests confidence in their ability to outmaneuver local threats. The patriarch of the family is a large buck who somehow managed to reach an age where his survival instincts have been honed to perfection. He posts lookouts, varies his family's feeding schedule, and has established multiple escape routes from every area they frequent. Hunting him requires the kind of long-term planning usually reserved for military campaigns. Your initial assessment reveals that conventional hunting approaches will be ineffective against targets this sophisticated. The buck's security arrangements include early warning systems, escape route maintenance, and adaptive scheduling that responds to perceived threat levels. Successful predation will require either overwhelming force, which you lack, or superior strategy. You begin with surveillance, spending weeks learning their patterns and identifying potential weaknesses in their security arrangements. The buck is clever, but he's also responsible for a family, and responsibility creates predictability. The surveillance phase becomes an education in advanced rabbit psychology and family dynamics. You learn that the buck's protective instincts create behavioral patterns that can be exploited by patient predators, willing to invest time in detailed observation and analysis. You discover that the does and young rabbits have preferred feeding areas that the buck checks on a regular schedule. More importantly, you notice that the buck has a habit of making one final patrol of these areas each evening, presumably to ensure that the day's foraging didn't leave any sign of the family's presence. The pattern recognition requires weeks of careful observation to distinguish between random variation and genuine behavioral consistency. Your notes, mental notes, since foxes lack writing materials, eventually reveal a schedule that's predictable enough to exploit while remaining complex enough to challenge conventional hunting approaches. Your plan develops over several weeks of careful observation. You'll need to position yourself along his patrol route, but in a location where the surrounding terrain gives you advantages in speed and maneuverability. The fallen log near the creek provides perfect cover, while the open ground beyond limits his escape options. The tactical analysis involves three-dimensional thinking about terrain, timing, and target behavior that represents the highest level of predatory planning you've ever attempted. Every aspect of the environment must be evaluated for its potential contribution to hunting success or failure. The execution requires patience that would have been impossible during your youth. You arrive at your position before dawn and remain motionless until well after sunset, fighting off cramps, ignoring the interesting sounds of easier prey moving through nearby areas, and maintaining focus despite the mind-numbing boredom of extended surveillance. The physical demands of extended motionless observation test every aspect of your self-discipline and physical conditioning. The mental challenge of maintaining focus while ignoring distractions requires the kind of concentration that can only be developed through years of practice. When the buck finally appears, following his predictable route through the evening shadows, the hunt unfolds with the precision of a well-rehearsed performance. Your approach is silent, your timing is perfect, and your technique is flawless. The moment of execution represents the culmination of weeks of preparation, observation, and strategic planning. Everything you've learned about hunting, territory management, and rabbit psychology converges into a single moment of applied expertise that demonstrates the difference between amateur hunting and professional predation. The buck is both surprised and impressed by the quality of your work, which is the kind of professional recognition that makes the effort worthwhile. With several years of management experience behind you, you begin to view your territory with the analytical eye of someone conducting a comprehensive performance review. Every aspect of your territorial infrastructure and management practices becomes subject to evaluation and potential improvement. The optimization process involves systematic analysis of resource utilization, infrastructure efficiency, and management practices to identify opportunities for improvement that could enhance both current performance and long-term sustainability. This level of analytical sophistication represents a significant evolution from the reactive management that characterized your early territorial ownership. You discover that certain areas of your territory are underutilized due to historical hunting patterns that no longer reflect current prey distributions or your evolved hunting capabilities. Reallocating patrol time and hunting effort based on current data rather than established habits produces immediate improvements in hunting success rates. Infrastructure analysis reveals that some of your early den modifications were based on theoretical needs that didn't materialize, while other genuine needs were never adequately addressed. A systematic renovation program brings your residential facilities up to current standards while eliminating features that consume maintenance effort without providing corresponding benefits. Cache network optimization involves geographical analysis of storage locations, content rotation schedules, and access patterns to maximize both storage efficiency and retrieval reliability. The mathematical complexity of optimizing a distributed storage system while maintaining security and accessibility challenges your analytical capabilities in productive ways. Your established status within the local fox community creates opportunities for social interactions that go beyond simple territorial boundary maintenance. These relationships provide access to information, resources, and assistance that significantly enhance your territorial management capabilities. The information network that connects established foxes throughout the region provides early warning about environmental changes, human development projects, and population dynamics that could affect territorial planning. Your contributions to this network, detailed observations about prey populations, weather patterns, and human activity, earn you access to similar information from other territories. Cooperative relationships with neighboring foxes create opportunities for mutual assistance during challenging periods, resource sharing during abundance, and coordinated responses to common threats. These relationships require careful management to maintain appropriate boundaries while maximizing mutual benefits. Your relationship with Sage has evolved into something resembling a professional mentorship that benefits both parties. Your questions about advanced territorial management provide her with opportunities to articulate and refine her own expertise, while her guidance helps you avoid mistakes that could compromise your territorial success. The success of your current territorial management has created opportunities to consider long-term goals that extend beyond basic survival and maintenance. These might include territorial expansion, infrastructure improvements, or the kind of legacy planning that ensures your territorial improvements will benefit future occupants. Territorial expansion analysis involves evaluation of adjacent areas for potential acquisition, assessment of your capacity to manage larger territories, and strategic planning for expansion timing that maximizes success probability while minimizing risk. The expansion planning process requires sophisticated analysis of resource requirements, management capacity, and opportunity costs that demonstrates the evolution of your thinking from reactive survival to proactive strategic planning. Your ability to consider hypothetical futures and evaluate alternative scenarios represents a fundamental cognitive advancement. Infrastructure development projects under consideration include major den renovations, cache network expansion, and the creation of specialized facilities that could enhance your territorial management capabilities. These projects require the kind of long-term resource allocation planning that would have been impossible when survival required immediate consumption of all available resources. Legacy planning involves considering how your territorial improvements and management innovations could benefit future fox generations, either through direct inheritance or through establishment of management practices that enhance long-term territorial productivity. Your relationship with the territory deepens as familiarity with seasonal patterns allows for increasingly sophisticated resource management. What began as simple occupancy has evolved into genuine stewardship, with long-term planning that balances immediate needs against future sustainability. The transformation from homeless juvenile to established territorial adult represents a fundamental shift in identity and capability. The fox who left the family den with minimal survival skills has become a competent territorial manager with the knowledge and infrastructure necessary for long-term success. Your education in independent living continues, but the focus has shifted from basic survival to optimization and improvement. The territory that began as a desperate refuge has become a carefully managed resource base that provides both current security and future opportunity for expansion and improvement. At 2 years old, you've achieved what could reasonably be called competence. Your hunting success rate has improved to the point where dinner is more of a planned event than a happy accident. Your territory is well established and properly marked, and you've managed an entire season without falling into any bodies of water while chasing prey. The transformation from bumbling adolescent to capable adult happened gradually enough that you didn't notice it occurring until one morning you realized that survival had stopped being a daily crisis and had become something more, like a sustainable lifestyle. The constant anxiety that characterized your early independence has been replaced by the quiet confidence that comes from having solved most of the basic problems of fox existence. Your territory no longer feels like borrowed space that might be taken away at any moment. Instead, it's become an extension of yourself, a carefully maintained ecosystem that reflects your personality, priorities, and accumulated wisdom about what works and what doesn't. Every improvement represents a lesson learned. Every modification reflects an adaptation to changing circumstances. The seasonal rhythms that once seemed mysterious and threatening have become as predictable as breathing. You know when the first spring flowers will attract the insects that attract the mice, when summer heat will drive prey animals to seek shade in predictable locations, when autumn abundance will require serious preparation for winter scarcity. Hunting has evolved from desperate scrambling to something resembling an art form. You've learned to read the landscape like a map, identifying the paths mice use, the places rabbits feel safe, and the times when various prey animals let their guard down. The education process involved countless hours of observation, experimentation, and failure analysis that gradually built a comprehensive understanding of predator-prey dynamics within your specific territory. Each unsuccessful hunt provided data about what doesn't work, while each success confirmed theories about what does. You've developed your own techniques, adapted to your particular strengths and the specific geography of your territory. There's a fallen log where voles like to shelter that you can approach from downwind, using the morning shadows for cover. A patch of tall grass near the creek where young rabbits come to feed, unaware that the rustling masks your approach. The creek that once represented an embarrassing obstacle has become one of your most productive hunting areas. The sound of running water masks your movements, while the moist soil preserves scent trails and tracks that reveal detailed information about prey animal traffic patterns. You've learned to use the water itself as a hunting tool, driving prey toward the creek, where escape options become limited. Your patience has improved dramatically. You can now lie motionless for hours, waiting for the perfect moment, fighting off the urge to scratch that spot behind your ear or investigate interesting smells. This kind of discipline would have been impossible during your impulsive youth, but maturity has brought with it the understanding that good things come to those who can remain perfectly still for unreasonable lengths of time. The meditation aspect of extended hunting sessions has become one of the unexpected pleasures of adult life. The enforced stillness creates a kind of active contemplation that sharpens awareness while calming the mind. You've learned to distinguish between productive waiting and mere procrastination, developing an intuitive sense of when patience will be rewarded and when it's time to try a different approach. A typical hunting session now follows a routine you've perfected through trial and error. You begin before dawn, when the world is still quiet and most humans are unconscious. The early light filters through the trees with the golden quality that makes everything look like a nature documentary, and you move through your territory with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly where the good spots are. Your pre-hunt preparation includes checking wind direction, assessing weather conditions, and reviewing mental notes about recent prey activity in different areas of your territory. This systematic approach eliminates much of the randomness that characterized your early hunting efforts, replacing hope with strategy and luck with preparation. The hunt itself unfolds according to principles that have been refined through years of practice. Approach routes are selected based on terrain analysis and scent management. Timing is coordinated with prey behavior patterns and environmental conditions. The execution combines technical skill with tactical awareness in ways that would have been impossible before you accumulated sufficient experience to think strategically rather than reactively. Your established status means that territorial challenges now come from younger foxes looking to claim their first territory, rather than peers competing for the same resources. These encounters have a different dynamic. You're no longer the inexperienced challenger, but the established resident with home field advantage. The psychological shift from territorial anxiety to territorial confidence has fundamentally changed how you approach these confrontations. Instead of worrying about whether you deserve to keep your territory, you focus on whether the challenger deserves to take it. The burden of proof has shifted, and your accumulated evidence of successful territorial management provides strong support for your ownership claims. A young male appears at your territory boundary one morning, displaying the kind of aggressive confidence that can only come from never having had your assumptions thoroughly challenged by reality. He's roughly the age you were when you first left home, with the same mix of determination and complete ignorance about how these situations typically resolve. "This looks like good territory," he announces, as if he's conducting a real estate appraisal. "I think I'll take it." You regard him with the patience of someone who's had this conversation before. "It's already taken," you explain, which seems obvious but apparently needs to be stated explicitly. He surveys your well-maintained territory with the critical eye of someone who's never had to dig their own den. "You're not using all of it," he observes, which demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of how territory ownership works. The comment reveals the challenger's inexperience more clearly than any formal credentials could. Territory management involves much more than simple occupancy. It requires understanding seasonal resource variations, maintaining sustainable prey populations, and balancing current extraction against future productivity. The areas that appear unused to inexperienced observers often represent careful conservation strategies that ensure long-term territorial viability. The negotiation that follows is brief and educational. You don't need to resort to actual violence. Your confidence and obvious familiarity with the terrain are enough to convince him that there are probably easier opportunities elsewhere. He retreats with his dignity mostly intact, though he makes a point of marking a few trees on his way out, just to demonstrate that he could have been a serious threat if he'd wanted to be. Your response to his symbolic territory marking is to ignore it completely, which demonstrates the kind of secure confidence that comes from knowing your territorial claims are unassailable. Young foxes often mistake dramatic gestures for meaningful threats, but experienced territorial owners understand that actions matter more than posturing. The encounter serves as a reminder of how much you've changed since your own territorial acquisition phase. The nervous energy that once characterized your approach to territorial disputes has been replaced by the calm competence that comes from knowing you've earned your position through successful management rather than accident or aggression. Each season now brings its own routine, refined through years of experience. Spring is for territory maintenance and the occasional romantic entanglement. Summer is for taking advantage of abundant prey and improving your den infrastructure. Autumn is for serious hunting and building up the cached food supplies that will carry you through the lean months. The seasonal cycle has become a comprehensive management system that integrates territory maintenance, resource extraction, infrastructure development, and strategic planning into a year-round program that maximizes both current success and future opportunities. Spring maintenance involves systematic inspection of territory boundaries, repair of winter damage to den infrastructure, and assessment of prey population recovery after winter losses. The season's abundant energy and mild weather provide optimal conditions for projects that would be difficult during other seasons. Your spring territorial inspections have evolved into comprehensive surveys that evaluate everything from boundary marker effectiveness to prey habitat quality. You've learned to identify early warning signs of problems that could become serious if left unaddressed: drainage issues that could cause flooding, vegetation changes that could affect prey populations, or signs of increased human activity that could require territorial adjustments. Winter has become your favorite season, despite its obvious challenges. The snow muffles sound and provides excellent tracking opportunities, while the reduced vegetation gives you clear sight lines across your territory. Most importantly, winter separates the competent foxes from the hopeful amateurs. It's a season that rewards experience and punishes improvisation. The winter hunting that once seemed impossibly difficult has become your specialty. Snow conditions that challenge inexperienced hunters provide you with advantages that more than compensate for the reduced prey availability. Your understanding of how snow affects prey behavior, combined with your knowledge of winter shelter patterns, allows you to maintain hunting success rates that would be impressive under any conditions. You've learned to read weather patterns with the accuracy of a meteorologist. The way the wind shifts before a storm, the quality of light that indicates snow is coming, the temperature changes, that drive small mammals into predictable shelter patterns. This knowledge gives you significant advantages over foxes who are still learning to plan beyond their next meal. Weather prediction has become both a practical skill and an intellectual pleasure. The subtle signs that indicate changing conditions, cloud formations, wind patterns, animal behavior, atmospheric pressure variations create a complex puzzle that engages your analytical abilities while providing crucial information for hunting and territorial management. Your domestic arrangements have settled into a comfortable routine of enlightened solitude. Your den has been expanded and improved with several seasons' worth of modifications. There's a main chamber with good drainage and ventilation, a secondary sleeping area for particularly cold nights, and a storage area where you keep your most successful food caches. The den that began as a hastily renovated badger set has evolved into a sophisticated residential complex that reflects years of gradual improvement and accumulated understanding of optimal fox housing design. Each modification represents a specific solution to a particular problem or an enhancement that improves comfort, security, or functionality. You've developed particular standards for housekeeping that your younger self would have found ridiculous. Everything has its place, scent marking is done on a regular schedule, and you've even created designated areas for different activities. There's a grooming spot with good morning light, a vantage point for territory surveillance, and a comfortable area where you can rest while remaining alert for interesting developments. The organization system extends beyond mere tidiness to encompass a comprehensive approach to domestic efficiency that maximizes both comfort and security. Your grooming area includes specialized surfaces for different types of maintenance, while your surveillance position provides optimal sightlines while remaining concealed from potential threats. Your daily routine has the comforting predictability of a well-run business. Morning hunting, afternoon territorial patrol, evening grooming and den maintenance, with time built in for the unexpected opportunities that make life interesting. It's a schedule that maximizes efficiency while remaining flexible enough to accommodate the irregular nature of prey animal behavior. The routine provides both structure and freedom, creating a framework that supports optimal performance while remaining adaptable to changing circumstances. Your schedule has evolved through trial and error to identify the optimal balance between different activities, ensuring that all necessary tasks receive adequate attention without creating rigid constraints that prevent opportunistic adaptation. Your relationship with the human neighbors has evolved into a state of mutual awareness and carefully maintained distance. You've learned their routines as thoroughly as they've learned yours. They know you exist, you know they exist, and everyone has agreed to pretend this isn't the case, as long as nobody crosses any obvious lines. The human-fox diplomacy that has developed over several seasons represents a sophisticated form of interspecies cooperation that benefits everyone involved. The humans get the satisfaction of coexisting with wildlife without dealing with property damage or safety concerns, while you get access to additional resources without harassment or interference. The garbage cans remain a tempting resource, but you've developed more sophisticated approaches than your early technique of knocking them over and hoping for the best. You've learned the pickup schedule, identified which houses are most likely to contain interesting scraps, and perfected a method of investigation that leaves minimal evidence of your involvement. Your garbage reconnaissance has evolved into a scientific discipline that combines schedule analysis, content assessment, and risk management into a systematic approach to resource extraction that maximizes benefits while minimizing exposure. The techniques you've developed could probably be taught as a graduate course in applied scavenging theory. There's an elderly woman who's clearly aware of your presence, but chooses to express this awareness by occasionally leaving interesting food items in locations where they might accidentally be discovered by wildlife. She maintains the fiction that this is coincidental, while you maintain the fiction that you just happen to patrol that area of your territory more frequently than statistical probability would suggest. This relationship represents the highest form of human-fox cooperation, a carefully choreographed dance of mutual benefit that respects the autonomy and dignity of both species while providing practical advantages for everyone involved. The food supplements your regular diet without creating dependency, while the woman gets the satisfaction of supporting local wildlife without encouraging problematic behavior. The local dog population has learned to respect your territorial boundaries through a series of negotiations that established clear rules of engagement. They're allowed to bark and make threats from behind their fences, while you're allowed to ignore them completely and continue about your business. It's a system that allows everyone to maintain face while avoiding actual conflict. The dog diplomacy represents perhaps your greatest achievement in interspecies relations, since it required overcoming the natural antagonism between foxes and dogs to create a workable coexistence agreement. The key insight was recognizing that dogs are primarily motivated by territorial display rather than actual aggression, allowing for negotiations that give them opportunities to perform their guard duties without creating genuine security threats. Your third year of territorial management has brought with it opportunities to expand your skill set beyond basic survival into areas that could be characterized as advanced fox studies. These include sophisticated cash management, long-term resource planning, and the kind of strategic thinking that separates successful territorial owners from mere occupants. Cash management has evolved from random food burial to a comprehensive storage system that incorporates principles of food science, geography, and logistics. Your current network includes primary caches for regular access, secondary caches for emergency reserves, and seasonal caches designed to take advantage of temporary abundance. The storage system includes redundancy features that protect against cache discovery by other animals, environmental damage from weather, and your own memory failures during periods of stress or distraction. The mathematical precision required to maintain accurate mental maps of dozens of cache locations while tracking contents, age, and accessibility has sharpened your cognitive abilities in ways that would have seemed impossible during your chaotic youth. Long-term planning has become an essential component of territorial management, requiring the kind of strategic thinking that considers not just immediate needs but future opportunities and challenges. Your planning horizon now extends months into the future, incorporating seasonal variations, prey population cycles, and potential territorial modifications. The strategic planning process includes scenario analysis that evaluates different possible futures and identifies optimal responses to changing conditions. This level of analytical sophistication would have been overwhelming when you were focused on day-to-day survival, but your accumulated competence has created mental capacity for higher-order thinking about territorial optimization and resource management. Your third year brings with it a challenge worthy of your accumulated skills. A family of rabbits has taken up residence in the ideal habitat at the center of your territory. They're not just any rabbits, these are experienced, clever rabbits who've clearly survived long enough to develop sophisticated anti-fox strategies. The rabbit family represents the kind of hunting challenge that separates amateur predators from professional hunters. Their survival to reproductive age indicates exceptional competence in anti-predator techniques, while their choice of prime territory within your domain suggests confidence in their ability to outmaneuver local threats. The patriarch of the family is a large buck who somehow managed to reach an age where his survival instincts have been honed to perfection. He posts lookouts, varies his family's feeding schedule, and has established multiple escape routes from every area they frequent. Hunting him requires the kind of long-term planning usually reserved for military campaigns. Your initial assessment reveals that conventional hunting approaches will be ineffective against targets this sophisticated. The buck's security arrangements include early warning systems, escape route maintenance, and adaptive scheduling that responds to perceived threat levels. Successful predation will require either overwhelming force, which you lack, or superior strategy. You begin with surveillance, spending weeks learning their patterns and identifying potential weaknesses in their security arrangements. The buck is clever, but he's also responsible for a family, and responsibility creates predictability. The surveillance phase becomes an education in advanced rabbit psychology and family dynamics. You learn that the buck's protective instincts create behavioral patterns that can be exploited by patient predators, willing to invest time in detailed observation and analysis. You discover that the does and young rabbits have preferred feeding areas that the buck checks on a regular schedule. More importantly, you notice that the buck has a habit of making one final patrol of these areas each evening, presumably to ensure that the day's foraging didn't leave any sign of the family's presence. The pattern recognition requires weeks of careful observation to distinguish between random variation and genuine behavioral consistency. Your notes, mental notes, since foxes lack writing materials, eventually reveal a schedule that's predictable enough to exploit while remaining complex enough to challenge conventional hunting approaches. Your plan develops over several weeks of careful observation. You'll need to position yourself along his patrol route, but in a location where the surrounding terrain gives you advantages in speed and maneuverability. The fallen log near the creek provides perfect cover, while the open ground beyond limits his escape options. The tactical analysis involves three-dimensional thinking about terrain, timing, and target behavior that represents the highest level of predatory planning you've ever attempted. Every aspect of the environment must be evaluated for its potential contribution to hunting success or failure. The execution requires patience that would have been impossible during your youth. You arrive at your position before dawn and remain motionless until well after sunset, fighting off cramps, ignoring the interesting sounds of easier prey moving through nearby areas, and maintaining focus despite the mind-numbing boredom of extended surveillance. The physical demands of extended motionless observation test every aspect of your self-discipline and physical conditioning. The mental challenge of maintaining focus while ignoring distractions requires the kind of concentration that can only be developed through years of practice. When the buck finally appears, following his predictable route through the evening shadows, the hunt unfolds with the precision of a well-rehearsed performance. Your approach is silent, your timing is perfect, and your technique is flawless. The moment of execution represents the culmination of weeks of preparation, observation, and strategic planning. Everything you've learned about hunting, territory management, and rabbit psychology converges into a single moment of applied expertise that demonstrates the difference between amateur hunting and professional predation. The buck is both surprised and impressed by the quality of your work, which is the kind of professional recognition that makes the effort worthwhile. With several years of management experience behind you, you begin to view your territory with the analytical eye of someone conducting a comprehensive performance review. Every aspect of your territorial infrastructure and management practices becomes subject to evaluation and potential improvement. The optimization process involves systematic analysis of resource utilization, infrastructure efficiency, and management practices to identify opportunities for improvement that could enhance both current performance and long-term sustainability. This level of analytical sophistication represents a significant evolution from the reactive management that characterized your early territorial ownership. You discover that certain areas of your territory are underutilized due to historical hunting patterns that no longer reflect current prey distributions or your evolved hunting capabilities. Reallocating patrol time and hunting effort based on current data rather than established habits produces immediate improvements in hunting success rates. Infrastructure analysis reveals that some of your early den modifications were based on theoretical needs that didn't materialize, while other genuine needs were never adequately addressed. A systematic renovation program brings your residential facilities up to current standards while eliminating features that consume maintenance effort without providing corresponding benefits. Cache network optimization involves geographical analysis of storage locations, content rotation schedules, and access patterns to maximize both storage efficiency and retrieval reliability. The mathematical complexity of optimizing a distributed storage system while maintaining security and accessibility challenges your analytical capabilities in productive ways. Your established status within the local fox community creates opportunities for social interactions that go beyond simple territorial boundary maintenance. These relationships provide access to information, resources, and assistance that significantly enhance your territorial management capabilities. The information network that connects established foxes throughout the region provides early warning about environmental changes, human development projects, and population dynamics that could affect territorial planning. Your contributions to this network, detailed observations about prey populations, weather patterns, and human activity, earn you access to similar information from other territories. Cooperative relationships with neighboring foxes create opportunities for mutual assistance during challenging periods, resource sharing during abundance, and coordinated responses to common threats. These relationships require careful management to maintain appropriate boundaries while maximizing mutual benefits. Your relationship with Sage has evolved into something resembling a professional mentorship that benefits both parties. Your questions about advanced territorial management provide her with opportunities to articulate and refine her own expertise, while her guidance helps you avoid mistakes that could compromise your territorial success. The success of your current territorial management has created opportunities to consider long-term goals that extend beyond basic survival and maintenance. These might include territorial expansion, infrastructure improvements, or the kind of legacy planning that ensures your territorial improvements will benefit future occupants. Territorial expansion analysis involves evaluation of adjacent areas for potential acquisition, assessment of your capacity to manage larger territories, and strategic planning for expansion timing that maximizes success probability while minimizing risk. The expansion planning process requires sophisticated analysis of resource requirements, management capacity, and opportunity costs that demonstrates the evolution of your thinking from reactive survival to proactive strategic planning. Your ability to consider hypothetical futures and evaluate alternative scenarios represents a fundamental cognitive advancement. Infrastructure development projects under consideration include major den renovations, cache network expansion, and the creation of specialized facilities that could enhance your territorial management capabilities. These projects require the kind of long-term resource allocation planning that would have been impossible when survival required immediate consumption of all available resources. Legacy planning involves considering how your territorial improvements and management innovations could benefit future fox generations, either through direct inheritance or through establishment of management practices that enhance long-term territorial productivity. Your territory has become more than just a place where you live. It's a carefully managed ecosystem that reflects your personality, capabilities, and accumulated wisdom about optimal foxland relationships. The transformation from desperate territorial acquisition to sophisticated ecosystem management represents perhaps the greatest achievement of your adult life. At 4 years old, you've achieved something approaching fox enlightenment. Your territory is perfectly maintained, your hunting skills are legendary among the local prey population, and younger foxes occasionally seek you out for advice, which you dispense with the weary wisdom of someone who's made every possible mistake at least once. The transition from competent adult to experienced professional happened so gradually that you barely noticed it occurring until younger foxes began treating you with the kind of deference usually reserved for natural disasters that might be dormant but probably aren't. Your reputation has spread throughout the local fox community, creating a consulting practice that you never intended to establish but seem to have inherited through simple longevity and accumulated competence. Your daily routine has evolved to accommodate both the responsibilities of territorial management and the unexpected demands of serving as an informal advisor to foxes who are still figuring out basic survival. It's a role that provides intellectual stimulation while requiring patience that your younger self would have found impossible to maintain. The wisdom that comes with experience has taught you to distinguish between problems that require immediate action and those that will resolve themselves given sufficient time and inaction. This knowledge saves considerable energy that can be applied to challenges that actually benefit from intervention, while allowing natural processes to handle situations that are best left alone. A young female appears at your territory boundary one autumn morning, displaying the kind of nervous determination that immediately identifies her as someone who's recently been informed that independence is no longer optional. She's clearly been practicing her confident expression, but it needs work. Her approach combines respectful distance with obvious anxiety in a way that suggests she's received conflicting advice about how to interact with established territorial owners. The grooming attention she's paid to her coat and the careful way she's positioned herself at the boundary demonstrate understanding of basic diplomatic protocols, while her nervous energy suggests this is her first formal consultation with an experienced fox. "I was wondering," she begins, then stops to reconsider her approach. "That is, I've heard that you might be willing to share some advice about territory selection." You consider her request while sizing up her general competence level. She's clearly put effort into grooming and territory marking, which suggests she understands the importance of presentation. More importantly, she's approached with appropriate respect rather than the aggressive posturing that marks truly hopeless cases. The quality of her initial approach provides significant information about her prospects for successful independence. Foxes, who understand the value of seeking advice before making major territorial decisions, tend to avoid the most obvious mistakes, while those who assume experience is unnecessary usually learn expensive lessons through trial and error. What kind of advice? you ask, because the quality of questions often reveals more about someone's prospects than their answers ever could. She launches into a detailed description of several potential territories she's been considering, complete with assessments of prey density, water access, and proximity to human disturbance. Her analysis is thorough and demonstrates a level of strategic thinking that wasn't common among your own generation at that age. The preparation evident in her presentation suggests she's taken territory selection seriously as a strategic decision rather than simply grabbing the first available space. Her evaluation criteria include both immediate necessities and longer-term considerations, indicating the kind of planning perspective that correlates with territorial success. You spend the afternoon walking the boundaries of her potential territories, offering commentary on factors she might have overlooked: drainage patterns that become important during spring floods, wind directions that affect scent dispersal, the seasonal migrations that temporarily alter prey availability. The field inspection reveals both strengths and blind spots in her analytical approach. Her assessment of obvious features is accurate and thorough, but she's missed some subtle factors that only become apparent through extended observation and experience with seasonal variations. The most important thing, you explain as you examine a promising hillside location, is to think beyond your immediate needs. Territory selection is a long-term investment, and what works for a young fox isn't necessarily what you'll want when you're established and possibly raising a family. She takes notes, which impresses you. Most young foxes assume they'll remember everything important, then spend their first winter discovering that memory is significantly less reliable than they'd hoped. The note-taking suggests a level of intellectual humility that's uncommon among recently independent foxes. Most assume their memories are perfect and their initial impressions are accurate, leading to expensive mistakes that could be avoided through better preparation and documentation. Your consultation extends beyond simple territory evaluation to include broader lessons about territorial management, resource planning, and the kind of long-term thinking that separates successful fox careers from extended struggles with basic survival. The afternoon becomes a comprehensive seminar in applied fox real estate that covers material you've never explicitly organized into teachable form. Your old territorial rival from your juvenile days reappears one spring, older and considerably more experienced, but still carrying the kind of grudge that suggests he's spent the intervening years nurturing his resentment like a hobby. Redclaw's return represents an interesting development in your personal history, the opportunity to revisit old conflicts from the perspective of accumulated experience and established success. The insecure young fox who once challenged your territorial claims has been replaced by a competent adult who's achieved his own territorial success, creating a dynamic that's both familiar and entirely different. He's established himself in a territory adjacent to yours, which creates the potential for the kind of ongoing drama that can make life unnecessarily complicated. His territory is well maintained and clearly prosperous, which means he's developed genuine competence to go along with his persistent attitude problem. The proximity of his new territory suggests either coincidence or intentional positioning, designed to continue old rivalries under new circumstances. Given Redclaw's personality, intentional positioning seems more likely, though his choice of location also indicates strategic thinking about territorial quality that transcends personal grudges. "I see you're still here," he observes during your first adult encounter, as if your continued existence is somehow personally offensive to him. "Still here." You agree, because pointing out that you were here first would require engaging with his fundamental premise that location ownership is somehow still negotiable. The exchange establishes the tone for your renewed relationship acknowledgement of history, without commitment to continuing old conflicts under new circumstances. Your response demonstrates the kind of diplomatic restraint that comes with confidence, while his comment reveals that some aspects of personality remain constant despite accumulated experience. The relationship that develops is complex and oddly satisfying. You're both established adults with mature territories and refined hunting skills, which means your rivalry can focus on subtler forms of competition. Who maintains better boundary markers? Who has the more impressive prey cache? Who handles territorial challenges with greater efficiency? It's the kind of ongoing contest that provides entertainment without requiring actual conflict. You respect each other's competence while maintaining the fiction that you're engaged in some kind of meaningful competition. The competitive dynamic has evolved from the desperate territorial disputes of youth to something more resembling professional rivalry, between established practitioners. The stakes are lower, but the standards are higher, creating a form of ongoing intellectual stimulation that adds interest to routine territorial management. Your accumulated experience has made you something of a local weather prophet. You can predict temperature changes by the behavior of insects, forecast storms by the way birds alter their feeding patterns, and estimate snowfall by subtle changes in air pressure that younger foxes don't even notice. The development of weather prediction skills represents one of the unexpected benefits of extended territorial observation. Years of daily attention to environmental conditions have created pattern recognition capabilities that extend far beyond simple hunting applications, providing advantages that compound over time as your forecasting accuracy improves. This knowledge gives you significant advantages during challenging seasons. While other foxes are caught off guard by sudden weather changes, you've already adjusted your hunting schedule, secured your food caches, and prepared your den for whatever's coming. Your weather prediction system combines multiple information sources into a comprehensive forecasting methodology that rivals the accuracy of professional meteorology. The integration of insect behavior, bird migration patterns, atmospheric pressure variations, and vegetation responses creates a redundant prediction system that provides advance warning of weather changes that affect territorial management decisions. A particularly harsh winter demonstrates the value of this experience. While younger foxes struggle with the unexpected severity of the cold and the deep snow that makes hunting nearly impossible, you're well prepared with substantial caches and detailed knowledge of the few remaining hunting opportunities. The winter that challenges other foxes becomes an opportunity to demonstrate the practical value of experience-based weather prediction. Your advanced preparation allows you to maintain comfortable living conditions, while others struggle with emergency adaptation to conditions they didn't anticipate. You watch from your comfortable, well-insulated den as less experienced foxes make increasingly desperate attempts to find food in conditions that would challenge even experienced hunters. Several of them don't survive the season, which is unfortunate but not particularly surprising. The observation of less experienced foxes during challenging conditions provides educational material about the practical consequences of inadequate preparation and the importance of developing comprehensive weather prediction capabilities. Their struggles highlight the advantages that come with accumulated experience and systematic preparation. Your reputation within the local fox community has evolved from simple territorial competence to recognized expertise in multiple areas of fox life management. This recognition brings both opportunities and responsibilities that weren't part of your original territorial acquisition plan. The consulting practice that has developed around your experience provides intellectual stimulation while contributing to the overall success of the local fox community. Your advice helps younger foxes avoid predictable mistakes, while your successful territorial management serves as a model for optimal fox-land relationships. The recognition extends beyond simple survival skills to include expertise in areas like strategic planning, resource management, and the kind of long-term thinking that allows successful foxes to build sustainable territorial practices rather than simply extracting available resources until they're depleted. Your influence on local fox education has become significant enough to affect the success rates of recently independent foxes in the region. The improved outcomes among foxes who seek your advice demonstrate the practical value of experience-based education and the importance of knowledge transfer between fox generations. Your relationship with the experienced vixen who served as your unofficial mentor during your early adult years has evolved into something resembling friendship, if foxes can be said to have friends. You've developed a system of mutual cooperation that benefits both your territories without requiring any formal agreements. Sage's continued presence as a neighbor and occasional collaborator has provided stability and continuity that extends beyond simple territorial adjacency. The relationship has matured from teacher-student dynamics to peer cooperation based on complementary expertise and mutual respect. She's excellent at detecting early signs of prey population changes, while your territory provides better winter hunting opportunities. You've worked out an arrangement for sharing information about territorial threats, unusual human activity, and the seasonal movements of prey animals. The information sharing arrangement has evolved into a sophisticated intelligence network that provides both participants with advantages that neither could achieve independently. The collaboration demonstrates the potential benefits of long-term relationships between established territorial neighbors. "You've turned out better than I expected," she mentions during one of your periodic boundary meetings, which counts as high praise coming from someone who's never been accused of excessive optimism. "I had good advice early on," you reply, which is your way of acknowledging her contribution to your success without getting too sentimental about it. The exchange reflects the comfortable familiarity that has developed between you, acknowledgement of history and mutual influence without excessive emotional expression. The relationship has achieved the kind of steady, reliable collaboration that provides practical benefits while respecting individual autonomy. Your fourth autumn brings with it the realization that your food storage system has become sufficiently complex to require systematic management. You've accumulated dozens of cache sites throughout your territory, each marked according to a system that made perfect sense when you created it, but has become somewhat mysterious with the passage of time. The cache audit represents a transition from intuitive resource management to systematic inventory control. Your storage network has grown beyond the capacity of simple memory-based tracking, requiring organizational approaches that weren't necessary when your cache system was smaller and simpler. You spend several weeks conducting a comprehensive audit of your stored resources, rediscovering caches you'd forgotten about, and sadly noting others that have been discovered by unauthorized scavengers. Some of your hiding spots have turned out to be too clever for your own good. You find yourself digging exploratory holes around trees that looked exactly like the tree you used as a landmark, but apparently weren't. The audit process reveals both the successes and limitations of your historical cache management approach. While your total stored resources are substantial, the accessibility and reliability of individual caches varies significantly based on factors that weren't adequately considered during the initial burial process. The audit reveals that you've successfully cached enough food to survive even an exceptionally harsh winter, assuming you can remember where you put most of it. You decide to implement a new organizational system that relies less on memory and more on systematic territorial division. The discovery of forgotten caches provides windfall resources while highlighting the inefficiencies in your current storage system. The new organizational approach will sacrifice some security for improved accessibility and reliability, representing a strategic shift based on accumulated experience with cache management challenges. With years of experience behind you, you begin to view your territory with the critical eye of someone conducting a comprehensive performance review. Every section is analyzed for efficiency, every hunting route is evaluated for potential improvements, and every aspect of your daily routine is considered for possible optimization. The optimization process represents a fundamental shift from reactive territorial management to proactive efficiency analysis. Your accumulated experience provides sufficient data to evaluate current practices against optimal theoretical approaches, identifying opportunities for improvement that weren't apparent during the territory establishment phase. You discover that you've been maintaining territory boundaries that are larger than necessary for your actual needs, which represents wasted effort that could be better applied elsewhere. After careful consideration, you decide to voluntarily reduce the size of your claimed territory, focusing your attention on the areas with the highest prey density and best defensive positions. The decision to reduce territorial size represents sophisticated strategic thinking about resource allocation and management efficiency. Rather than maximizing territorial claims, you're optimizing territorial management to achieve better results with less effort, demonstrating the kind of mature thinking that comes with accumulated experience. This decision surprises the neighboring foxes who've never seen anyone voluntarily give up territory. You explain it as a practical matter. Smaller territory means less patrol time, which means more time available for hunting and den maintenance. The voluntary territorial reduction challenges conventional assumptions about territorial behavior while demonstrating confidence in your ability to maintain territorial success through efficient management rather than simply claiming maximum space. The decision reflects sophisticated understanding of the relationship between territorial size and management quality. The released territory is quickly claimed by younger foxes, who regard your decision as evidence that you're either extremely confident or completely insane. You prefer to think of it as evidence that you've learned to distinguish between what you want and what you actually need. Your approach to territorial management has evolved from day-to-day problem-solving to long-term strategic planning that considers multiple scenarios and prepares for various possible futures. This planning capability represents perhaps the most significant development in your intellectual growth since achieving territorial independence. The strategic planning process includes analysis of demographic trends in local fox populations, assessment of environmental changes that could affect territorial viability, and evaluation of human development patterns that might require territorial adjustments. The sophistication of this analysis rivals the complexity of professional resource management in any species. Your planning horizon now extends multiple seasons into the future, incorporating cyclical patterns in prey populations, weather variations, and the predictable challenges associated with aging and potential health changes. This level of forward thinking was impossible when survival required focus on immediate challenges. The strategic framework you've developed provides guidance for decision-making that extends beyond simple reaction to current conditions. Your territorial management decisions now consider long-term consequences and optimization opportunities that weren't apparent when your experience base was limited to short-term survival challenges. The success of your territorial management has created opportunities to consider questions about legacy and the long-term impact of your territorial improvements. These considerations represent a form of thinking that transcends individual survival to encompass broader questions about environmental stewardship and knowledge transfer. Your territorial improvements, infrastructure development, resource management innovations, and diplomatic relationships with neighboring foxes have created value that extends beyond your own occupancy. The question of how to preserve and transfer this accumulated value has become an interesting intellectual challenge that engages your strategic planning capabilities. The possibility of eventually training a successor who could inherit and build upon your territorial improvements represents a form of legacy planning that wasn't part of your original territorial acquisition goals. The intellectual challenge of knowledge transfer and succession planning provides new dimensions to territorial management that extend beyond simple resource extraction and survival. Your territorial management innovations, cache system design, weather prediction methodology, and diplomatic protocols for neighbor relations represent intellectual property that could benefit future fox generations if properly documented and transferred. The challenge of preserving and communicating this knowledge has become an unexpected aspect of mature territorial management. At 6 years old, you've achieved the fox equivalent of distinguished middle age. Your muzzle shows the first hints of gray. Your hunting style has evolved to emphasize efficiency over athleticism, and younger foxes have begun treating you with the kind of careful respect usually reserved for natural disasters that might be dormant but probably aren't. The physical changes that mark the transition from prime adulthood to mature middle age have arrived with the subtlety of a gradually changing season. So gradual that you barely noticed them until you caught your reflection in the creek one morning and realized that the distinguished-looking fox, staring back, had somehow replaced the energetic adult you'd been expecting to see. The grey around your muzzle isn't dramatic, but it's unmistakable to anyone who knows what to look for. More significant are the subtle changes in how you move through your territory, still confident and capable, but with a measured quality that conserves energy for when it's needed, rather than displaying it constantly just because you can. Your reputation within the local fox community has evolved from competent territorial manager to fox who probably knows what he's talking about, which comes with both privileges and responsibilities that you never anticipated when you were focused on basic survival and territorial establishment. Your reputation as a source of reliable advice has spread throughout the local fox community, and you find yourself hosting informal consultations with younger foxes who are facing challenges similar to ones you've already solved. This is gratifying in the way that being asked for directions is gratifying. It confirms that you know where you are and how you got there. The consulting practice that has developed around your accumulated experience provides intellectual stimulation while serving a community function that you find unexpectedly satisfying. There's something deeply pleasant about helping younger foxes avoid mistakes that you remember making yourself, even if some of them will undoubtedly ignore your advice and learn those lessons the hard way. A young fox named Ash approaches you with nervous formality, seeking advice on a territorial dispute. His rival is testing boundaries in ways that are technically legal but psychologically provocative, strategic genius, or chaotic recklessness. It's hard to tell. You recognize the game, pressure without escalation. You teach Ash to respond with restraint, strategic patience, and proportionate action. He listens intently, absorbing your hard-won wisdom. Age has shifted your methods. Joints protest long surveillance, and recovery from hunts takes longer. But strategy replaces stamina. You hunt smarter, not harder. Your refined techniques maximize efficiency, conserve energy, and improve results. Your hearing, now finely tuned, discerns prey movements and scent shifts with expert precision. The younger generation of foxes has changed. They form alliances, share intel, and cooperate, a contrast to the solitary philosophy of your youth. You observe their social innovations with curiosity and cautious admiration. Though different, their methods are effective. Spring brings unexpected connection in the form of Ember, an independent vixen with her own territory and similar values. What begins as mutual mediation evolves into intellectual partnership. Her critiques challenge your methods, suggesting optimized boundaries and efficient resource use, echoing conclusions you've only recently reached. Whether coincidence or observation, the alignment deepens your respect. Your seasonal planning now reflects long-term strategy, adapting hunting and maintenance to suit changing abilities. You've built infrastructure and optimized territory not just for yourself, but for those who'll come after. Legacy now shapes your thinking. Mentoring younger foxes and refining succession plans become key parts of your work. Who will inherit your domain? What knowledge must be passed on? These questions drive you to preserve the systems you've built, physical and intellectual. Your focus expands from survival to sustainability, ensuring your insights outlast your occupancy. You've become more than a fox, you've become an institution. At 8 years old, you've achieved something rare in fox society: genuine old age. Your territory is smaller but perfectly optimized. Your hunting is surgical rather than athletic. And younger foxes seek you out not just for advice, but for the kind of wisdom that can only come from having survived everything the world has to offer at least once. The transition to elder status happened so gradually that you barely noticed it until you realized that younger foxes had started approaching you with the kind of reverent caution usually reserved for ancient trees or significant geological features. Your accumulated experience has transformed from personal asset to community resource, creating responsibilities you never anticipated during your youth. Your daily routine now reflects both physical limitations and hard-earned wisdom. Hunts are shorter but more efficient. Patrols focus on key areas, and evenings are spent observing subtle seasonal shifts: the thickening of the old oak, the rerouted creek, the expanding human settlement. These long-term patterns are invisible to younger foxes, but clear to you. With age has come influence. Foxes from distant territories now seek your counsel. You've become more diplomat than hunter, resolving boundary disputes, clarifying roles, and simplifying chaos. Cooperation without clarity isn't efficiency. You remind a confused sibling pair, redrawing their borders into something sustainable. Your own adaptations reflect wisdom. Hunting now favors patience over speed. Your den has been redesigned for comfort, storage, and even basic medicine. Aging hasn't meant decline, it's demanded creativity. A young fox lingers near your borders, watching, asking, learning. He's not just after land, he's studying your legacy. You share generously. Knowledge must outlive its keeper. Your bond with Ember, once casual, is now deeply rooted. Independent yet interdependent. You consult each other on hard decisions, support in crisis, and maintain your autonomy. Your final major endeavor is a sophisticated cache network, landmark-based, redundant, and resilient. A true legacy project. You spend more time teaching prey behavior, seasonal cycles, the art of inter-fox diplomacy. Survival isn't about rules, you tell a young listener. It's about principles, knowing them well enough to adapt when the unknown comes. You've passed most of your territory to a successor who has proven worthy. He leads with competence and seeks your advice, but decides independently, a sign of lasting strength. The methods you developed for resource use, social balance, and territory management are now shaping the next generation. As snow begins to fall, you return to your den with quiet satisfaction. The land you once defended so fiercely is now tended by those you've guided. The society you helped shape continues to evolve, echoing your values. You've lived wisely, and what you've built will endure. And for a fox, that is enough.